So happy Sunday. I have been thinking I do think a lot about just so many things having to do with the movie The Sound of Freedom. I still haven't seen it yet. I don't go to the theater in general a lot. I haven't gone in years. So I don't think I will be, probably won't go just because I just don't like going to the theater. But I do support it, and I've supported Tim Ballard and his cause for 9 years. And so I knew people that knew him, and as the movie's been out, I've there've been a lot more videos about more and more stories, and they're very, very often just Fight the New Drug is a good YouTube. I think that's the name of the YouTube channel. Um, and there was an interview either with them or someone similar with a girl that literally was kidnapped and threatened to be in that type of film. She was an adult, but you have to understand that's some of the things that you just need to watch Tim Ballard and know someone that is in the inside. Of course, his job is really to rescue children or underage girls. Rarely are they willing, and sometimes they grow up and that really does happen. So I watched a girl being interviewed that was a part of a trial, so it really was real. You know that it's not a fake story. If they're in the trial, there's evidence that they were trafficked. So she was definitely kidnapped as an adult. She thought she was going to a fitness photo shoot. So it's very, and they talk a lot about, pornography and porn. And for some men, it helps them to know the true story so that they can have less of a desire, I guess, to watch it. I don't know, but definitely get help if you are addicted to that. It definitely is not going to help you avoid contention in your life, especially as Tim has described. I don't watch it, but just listening to women that are part of it, like they are literally they all, even those that willingly joined it, they're like, I was just the R word. It was just violence, not consensual, just nothing. And then you wonder why men, it will cause men to disrespect women. I think we that is an issue in society, and it does dim that light in you. um, Makes it harder to feel a spirit, right? If you want to have good relationships, that should be another motivation to not watch it. You'll end up obviously objectifying women, not respecting their opinions, but you just understand being addicted to watching women not get consent, men not getting consent from women, and you're addicted to seeing that. And then a lot of men realize they're addicted to watching women be the R word, abused. So of course that leads to men that watch it to also abuse. So, and it's also going to be emotionally. It's not going to inspire you, men. It's not going to inspire men to go for women that will want them. Satan wants misery, and if you're inviting him into your life by watching women be abused, God's not going to send His Spirit and be with you and help you in your relationships, help you get along with women, or say that you're going to offend women, girlfriend, your wife more if you are inviting Satan in. So there's a lot of reasons to not watch that stuff. And I think it's, according to Tim Ballard, he just was saying a lot in 2020, it was worse than ever. And then, of course, since people were home all the time, all addictions were worse than ever. And when we all went back to church, I was so excited, but you just see people are just so angry. It's going to make you more prone to anger or to become addicted to argue about politics or just anything. But it's fruitless. Just listen to, I'll keep trying to listen to what President Nelson's, advice and request, as saints, as the Book of Mormon teaches. as our scriptures teach, contention is of the devil. So if we see that happening, just try to recognize it. Don't try to force someone to be a part of your contention. Don't bait them. Don't. I'll stop there. But a year ago, I did make a video where I was talking about how to tell how big someone's nose is. So I was just looking at several different pictures, and if you look at the death mask of Joseph Smith, um, it's hard to apply some of the things I said last summer, and I still agree with. But if you look at the death mask, you do realize it's flat. Like a lot of these, some ways you can tell how big the nose is if you're standing up and light is coming from above. The light is going to hit the nose where it starts to protrude. Whereas the death mask in these pictures that I took, it's almost sitting flat, so the light is very diffused. I mean, there is still some shadows, but they want to diffuse it so you can see the details. You can see Joseph's face, right? But some of the things I'll be talking about today are not. And I think that's where people get confused looking at the front forward facing, because unless you have see the death mask or some of the versions of the death mask, the older ones, you could see it more, the different light change where the nose protrudes. I'm going to pull up the profile. Okay. So we do know from looking at this that his nose is protruding out really high. And again, there probably is some swelling in his face. And you can look at the artwork to see where did his nose start to protrude out. And then where is it flat? Because the light is going to hit, well, the light is already hitting differently right there, right? Than it is right there. Okay. It's hitting differently than right there. So each curve of your face, the light and shading is going to change. I witnessed a guy that was doing Photoshop on a very attractive man. He was showing me my pictures, my headshots, and this guy that was a good-looking actor, he was getting rid of all these shadows. He's like, oh, he wants me to get rid of that. In the end product, he made him look fat. It's like, oh, you made the poor guy look fat, but he has the highest good-looking cheekbones. Like, why did you do that? And then he photoshopped the heck out of my face after I said, please don't do much, don't do anything unless it's major, like hair in my face, those things you want to Photoshop out for like a headshot. But I'm not big on Photoshop. I don't like changing things, and I'm not um, that big on it. But one person that has not a super small nose, but it doesn't look that big from the front, um, is Elder Bednar. But you can see that his nose is protruding out pretty high. And then if we look at the artwork of Joseph Smith, we can go look at life drawings and just look at Maudsley's artwork. You can see even more clearly because he was sketching from a shadow. You can see the nose is protruding out very high above the eyes, right? And so Elder Bednar, his nose is protruding out about with the crease of his eye. And so, like if we look at natural lighting is really good, especially because light is coming from above. And then it can be opposite, like right there, where it looks lighter, but the light change will just change with the curves of your face and whatever the lighting is, right? So since light's coming from the sun, his nose is going to be lighter because it's coming from above. And then you've got that darker shadow right there. He's got quite an intense expression right there. And he definitely has attached earlobes. Those are very attached earlobes. But let's go down. And did I show this? Here's a profile. Zoomed in as much as I can. You can see his nose is protruding quite high. So you see how we're seeing the different shading. There's a good one with not good lighting, but you can really see. So sometimes the nose is lighter and right there is darker. And then if light is coming this way, sometimes it's lighter there and then darker because you can see also skin tone. Sometimes they get more sun on the nose. And we've got someone like Ben Stiller. It definitely doesn't have a small nose, but it protrudes out a little bit lower. He has a little more space in between his eyes. I'm just gonna go to the top to see more recent. And things are gonna change a lot with each of these because I'm sure he's on and off getting fillers and Botox. So those things are gonna happen. He even has it's like he really does like look like the Larsa daguerreotype because he's got a lopsided smile. In a lot of pictures, he even has a deeper crease next to that eye, his left eye, more than his right. That's interesting to see his daughter as an adult. It's strange to see their kids grow up. Um, yeah, but you see quite a bit of space in between the eyes. Let's find a little bit different lighting. But it's still pretty flat, but then it gets a little bit, you can see that there's a slight color change right there as it's protruding out. So it almost, sometimes it looks like his nose is protruding up kind of high. Sometimes it looks a little bit lower. Now, do you think his nose looks bigger or smaller than the Larsen daguerreotype? I think his nose looks bigger, like where the nasal ridge is to the point of where the tip of the nose is. It looks like a bigger nose, that it protrudes out higher. But they definitely have a similar shaped eyebrow. Space in between, he's definitely got this big triangle and it's very flat. It's a lot lighter. The color change is very low right there where it gets a little bit darker. So that means he's getting more sun on that part of his nose than he is right there because it's protruding out right at that point with the lower lash line with the Larsen daguerreotype. Okay, so those are just some ways to see that. But yeah, just looking at this picture holistically, seeing that that left eyebrow, as I've said for 6 years now, I see a sort of a crease right here. I see a crease right there. I mean, everyone's talking about looking for this line going up and down, but I see a wrinkle right there, and this shorter just sort of stops right there. It just stops about right there. Whereas you can see clumps of eyebrow hairs all the way out, and it matches the art. Looks good, like the artwork. And so you can see is the step deformity. Um, but I was looking at the nose today. It really is fascinating to look at his nose now. I want you to just show you holistically, just looking at your eyes with your, you know, with the naked eye, squint your eyes, and you see where is there a major shade difference, like right there. Now, people are not artists. It's really hard for them to look for those minor shading differences to see if something is round or something is, you're looking for the most minute details. Not everyone can do that. And a computer sometimes isn't that good at understanding things, shockingly, right? Because they have like a 98%, I have to look up the exact number, but way up there of false positives, right? But then there was this line right there. Look, this is a scar. Look at these scars on Joseph's. This is Joseph's nose. Okay, here's the shape of Joseph's nose. And when I outline this, I really could go out to there. If I squint my eyes, realistically, his nostril probably goes out to there, right? But part of this is inside of his nose, and then part of that is outside of his nose. So I'm gonna keep this muted, but you'll see right here. No, come back. This is that scar and that yellow line. This shadow falls right on that scar. Okay. And if you squint your eyes, that's how you can see. See, the lighting is opposite, so lighting is really diffused, coming from above mostly. Since I believe this is Joseph Smith, and I believe it was Lucian Foster, I believe he had the same setup as in Phoebe's picture. I think that's the oldest, the youngest picture of Phoebe and Woodruff with Wilfred Woodruff, and he said he and Phoebe had their individuals taken, and the background looks so similar. The lighting, I think I can see a part of a lamp on the table, so it would have been lower. So he was getting some light, I believe, from below, and I was always wondering that for years. I'm like, until I found and analyzed the photos that we believe could be by Lucian Foster, because there's no stamp saying Lucian Foster, but I believe it is. But just look at that. So right here, where what I'm pointing out, you see this. I could have pulled that up higher, but right where that line, that shadow changes, it's opposite, where it's darker there, lighter up there, because there's more light coming from below and from the side. So there's more light coming from above, so then the shadow, it's opposite. But you see, that's where the nose curves and lines up perfectly. And the shape of that nostril is really, really good. The shape right there, right there. But you've got a scar right there. But it's pulling it together. I'm not a fan of the 3D death mask. Even though, the church puts it, you can download it for free and look at it, but you can see like that broken and remodeled nose. You're sort of seeing an angle going that way, and you're seeing an angle going that way by following these shadows. And just looking, and just look at this holistically. You can see that this is rounded and this is rounded. Some people's chins are flat and recede, like the Larson daguerreotype. You see I have a little bit of shadow, and then it gets dark really fast in the middle. It means there's a sharp change. Okay, do you understand that? These deeper shadows right here. Whereas this is longer and this is shorter. Okay. It's got a pretty, it looks about the same length right there. So it's curving in, but it's curving out quite a bit. And I can understand people are confused by the texture and everything, but looking at the profiles and looking at the painting, especially the painting, you can see it's a very rounded chin. It's not flat. Okay. You can see his chin is not flat. It's got a deep line right there, whereas it's not not very deep, because this is very flat, and then that's slightly rounded, but it's really flat right there. It's just going back. I know it's hard to understand that. I'm trying to explain it, but and then you can understand and see, his eyes are not level, but his nose is. So even though I'm an artist, I can see a lot of things, Tegan and Machi, Tegan Lucas and Machi Henneberg. When I read the paper, it took me a while to have more appreciation for it, because I definitely wanted it to be different, but they saw a lot of things that I just had not noticed, that I kept tilting. I kept thinking his head was tilted. I'm like, oh, his eyes are tilted, so his head is tilted. And they're like, no, his left eye is lower than his right. You can see it in the death mask. And so then I read that, and I had read their paper in 2021, and then it was a very emotional year in 2021 because I had read it early in the spring, and then we were working on it. It was done. We were trying to get it published, but I knew it didn't feel right. I knew it wasn't done, and we did change it. We changed some things, but there was a question of looking at the death mask. So you can see on the death mask the same thing, that the left eye is lower than the right, but it was, I think I can say this, but like, but was that caused with the death, right? This lowered eye, or how do we know that he had this injury before he died when he was photographed, as because he's not dead right here, right? He's alive, probably spring 1842. So that's when I went to Salt Lake City and felt very strongly I had to go. There would have been no way I would have read In Search of Million Chanel Brother Joseph again, and then I read Dr. Herod's notes in there. I didn't know that existed. I knew nothing about Dr. Herod or Dr. Van de Graaff. You know, again, it was Shannon Michael Tracy that paid Zygote Media, and they'd often worked with the anatomist, Dr. Van de Graaff. And so he's like, can we do? They all were excited, and it just, I felt the spirit so strong reading In Search of Joseph. And then I was like, why doesn't anyone know about this? I'm just very passionate. Because at that point, when I finally read that, end of 2021, well, I read it in 2022, very beginning of 2022. Anyway, so they study the schools, and so Dr. Herod notes. Um, well, I'll just kind of mention some of the things that point out my mind. Dr. Van de Graaff, you can just read the notes. I'm not going to go through them right now. What I could see, and I didn't know any. I wanted Tegan Lucas to study the schools, but then I found that someone had done a really good study. I'd read Joseph Lyons, but I didn't understand. I didn't know what In Search of Joseph was. I hadn't read it. You know, I didn't hadn't read. So it was 1995. Even though it's in Million Shall Know Brother Joseph again, it was a 1995 study. So Dr. Van de Graaff noted the shape of the eyebrows that I could see too, and it's almost like this triangle, but you can see the shadows, right? Do you see shadow changing? This is the shape of his brow bone, and it's very unique. Okay, this is my artistic rendition of the skull, and then it was only a 43-minute video, but you can go to the artistic analysis to see this. Well, you can see the same thing on the death mask, the exact same shape, and that's very unique. I went a little too fast that time. Okay, you see that shape. Obviously, it's more obvious, but you know it is happening on both. It's, you know, I don't know. Okay, you can see that shadow change because light's coming from above. It's a little bit lighter right here, and it's a little bit darker right there. This is, you can see things 3D. I guess some people need a 3D to kind of, but then when you start messing with it, oh man, it's just, anyway, you can make yourself sick getting dizzy. But you can just see that same shape. So Dr. Herod could see that because, frankly, the skull that was buried is Joseph. Um, has like no facial bones, right? And so I knew that Machi and Tegan thought they had not read this at all. Okay, they did not know. They read this after they had already said that they could see. They didn't call it a step deformity, but the left eye was lower than the right. And then I researched a step deformity. I'm like, it's this left orbital bone, the flattered cheekbone. So Dr. Herod stated he could see that left orbital bone. hole is lower than the right, his left, his right, right? And you can see it in the death mask. So even though I'm an artist, I can see these things. These doctors, an anatomist. Dr. Vandergraff was an anatomist, and so as you understand, Hiram has the bullet hole. So Curtis likes to simplify it and say, oh, it's just because the bullet hole isn't mid there, but it just grazed it. It just grazed it. But then you've got Dr. Joseph Lyons that did a test to see could that happen. Oh, and he got special because he's a doctor. He's able to get test schools that they could practice with surgery and cover. I don't remember what he covered it with. Something that was it could mimic soft tissue and see could it just graze go through the soft tissue. He tried it many times and it would always shatter. The bones shattered. And then Dr. Vandegraff thought that the break looked very fresh with no decay, and there was decay here. There's a hole. There's a hole right there. I think he did fall on his left side, head first, his head, then his neck, and then his whole body on his left side. And then they lifted him up onto a well, and I think he sort of moved. He wasn't dead yet, but you can see that. So this is for there to be this deformity, as they state. If it had happened when he died, it wouldn't have stayed intact, right? So it was an injury, an old injury. So that lowered left eye socket was a remodeled injury. So it was, I can't say, I don't think I even remember what was said, and it wasn't much, but it was, yeah, I'd given this to the people I'm working with. Um, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'd given it to Dr. Henneberg, and we sort of talked about it a little bit. So, but they were focused on, they'd already decided in 2019. It's just, and we talked about the artwork, and I just was freaking out about permissions and what do I do, and I just didn't know what I was doing. So then they decided no artwork, but I'm like, well, no, I got the permissions, and it just was, especially because you didn't have to do anything to use Maudsley's, because the church was like, oh, just use the call number, just reference the call number in the paper. Um, Very simple. They're like, we're not gonna make you pay anything. I think BYU, I did pay something just because they had to scan it. I paid for a lot of things over time. So I was really sorely disappointed the artwork didn't end up in it. But I have my website, all right? And I didn't write the paper, but you can just see holistically that shape. As an artist, you see that deep shape, right? If we go back, look at the eyelids. We can go to YouTube and just look at that. I'm trying to remember, when did I do this? Was it, yeah, it was close to 2020. So it's been over 2 years. And I'd already done a video about the eyebrows. But this is me sketching the eyes. And if you squint, you can see that shape right there. It's so darkened because that obviously isn't the edge of his eye. It's more over here, right? And same here. Light is just hitting it blown out there, whereas it's too dark right there. So it's hard to see the eye shape, but if you squint your eyes, you can see where the shade changes. So that's how I did with that. And so it's just a 3-minute video. I'm gonna zip through it, and I chose a horrible color, but you can see when I put it on there, you can see there's that crease lines up there, and then that one. And I'll go to where I talk about the other eye. Okay. And again, I'll just keep saying it. The sketching, it's just basically pointing things out. It is an artistic technique. But as far as forensics go, like you shouldn't be covering things. You can see more of the eye, and you can see the length of the eye. Basically, I lined this up with with a distorted, not great photo of the death mask, and just sketched everything and things, that eyebrow is falling into place, right? So if you watch these videos on my website, you'll see that I am talking over it, but some of these things I'm not. So you can see it's falling in, but it's just that heavy eyelid, and you can tell from my picture that the man in my picture is very, very injured. You can see on these lips that there's, if you squint your eyes, you see a shadow right there, that there is a scar. And you can sort of see some things happening right there. And if you squint your eyes, you can see this part of the lip is kind of coming up a little bit. You see how this sort of has a little bit more of a curve, that upper lip, where just this lip, this side rests down. That this is really unique, and it's more on this side. It matches the same side as the painting. So I think the painting was from life. Do you understand? And this still amazes me. Because if you look at the older, like even look at this, you can't see that on the hair. You don't see that highlight. Um, because there is so much gloss on the painting, I think they must have just, because I know they're excited about this, so I got a really pixelated version of this. It probably looked like that. Whereas this is a lot brighter, and you can see a lot more detail, and you can see, if you squint your eyes, this shape, which is how his left of his forehead is shaped like that. But do you see this? How it comes up more on that side, it more rests down because he has more scars, and you see how different this death mask is. Curtis loves the pedestal death mask. It's not, it looks really different. It looks really, really different to me than the double death mask. Um, the double death mask is on display because it is the oldest. It might have cells from Joseph and Hiram, or did embedded in it. It touched their skin. But do you see how this is more lifted up right there? That's more rested down. And so when I outlined the painting, I was amazed that that shape. Do you see how this comes up a little bit more, and that's more rested down? Let's look at the painting again. That comes up a little bit more. It was rested. So he's arguing that this is in a reversed perspective and is based on a daguerreotype reversed. But the correct perspective is when you reverse so the daguerreotype is your face reversed, like how you see yourself in the mirror. And he thinks that the daguerreotype in that wrong perspective. So William B. McCarl thought that, going on and on about the ring on the right hand. Well, I found Maudsley's artwork, which is from life. There's no claim that was from a daguerreotype. There's that gold ring on his right hand. And so again, I'm contending that this painting is in the correct perspective, because you can see how it comes up a little bit more right there, and then it rests down. And something is pulling up this side of the mouth. He's got a little bit of scars right there. And I do see a deep line right there. So when I superimpose it, that falls into place, actually. So if you squint your eyes, you see it's a little bit lighter right there, it's darker right there. That's an indication to me that there is a scar right there. Kind of looking at how that is sort of flat and pulled up. We need to watch. Let's look at the mouth one, so you see more of the mouth. I can see that. I can see that, although it's so blown out on this side. But it's a very, very damaged man. If you just read, you see that he was tarred and feathered in March 1832, and so They see that they had their hands in his hair and his clothes, and you can just see how he's describing it. He's going into detail, and then he sort of goes back in time again. He's sort of random. He kind of goes around, and that just happens when you were talking about something that really was traumatic. This was a real event. So then he goes back in time and says, "No, no, Emma heard tapping on the door." So he's already talking about the mob being there, and then he goes back in time, and in another breath, he's going, "No, Emma heard tapping on the door first." So he's talking from her perspective. First, he talks from his perspective that she told him to lay on the trundle bed with the little boy. I watched some guys on Stick of Joseph talking about this and said two twin boys. No, it was a little boy. Joseph was holding little Joseph. Emma had Julia, and little Joseph was more sick with what did they have? Well, anyway, I think they mentioned the measles. There, it's in the second. There you go. They're sick with the measles. They broke through. She's screaming, and then he's talking about being carried out, and he goes, "Wait, no, Emma first. Before that happened, her tapping on the window, trying to figure out what's going on. She didn't think much of it, and then all of a sudden they just burst in, and Joseph was so close to the door that it was just really fast that he was asleep, and then he's woken up to people dragging him, so he didn't have time. He was holding a baby as that happened. He kicked them, and then he apparently got a guy in the face, and that guy was really mad. He's covered in blood and just grabbed Joseph's face, and then he choked him. And and then they drug him, and he thought that Sidney Rigdon was dead. Okay, and they went through. They just kept taking. They kept talking about Simons, and he's really trying to get these details. It's just to figure out who was there. So Simon's writer was very bitter and angry and left the church. Joseph misspelled his name on a mission call, so then he didn't go on the mission. Um, and then they're arguing about what they're going to do to him. And Sidney Rigdon, basically, I think it was less men that drug him. There was a bigger mob took Joseph because he was a big guy and he was muscular. So he almost took all of them. But they're like, if he even gets 1 foot on the ground, he will run or he'll get away. So, and then they decided they would scratch his whole body and just beat him up and not kill him, and then tar and feather him. So he'd already passed out and come to, and I believe he passed out again. So they shoved a paddle that had tar, and they're trying to make him eat the tar. Okay, and then right here he talks about on page 207, eat some tar, and then they tried to force a vial into his mouth. He spells it differently, but they're just keeping it accurate to what is written there. He broke his teeth, and that's why he talked with a whistle. And I believe that's why he has that scar on his lips from it being. His clothes were torn off except for his shirt and collar, and then they beat him up and they scratched him, and he passed out again. And they had to rip the tar off of him. So this was March 1832. He was a martyr. There's a scripture that talks about this, but when did this get written? When was this said? That we believe that this is about Joseph. It's very specific. It's the heading says it's about the coming forth in 1830, 2 years before. That the Gentiles be established, they will be saved if they obey. And so we go to verse 10, and you see they talk about in verse 9. Uh, it, they're talking about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. And when they shall come, they're talking about the Gentiles. Um, that thy seed shall begin to know these things, so that they know that they'll be falling away, and that the descendants of Nephi and the Nephites and the Lamanites, that they will forget, but God made a covenant. They're of the house of Israel. That's partly why people were being murdered in Missouri, because they were saying the Native Americans owned this land. That got you killed in the 1800s because they wanted to get the Native Americans off the land. And the Mormons are saying, You're of the house of Israel, and you inherited this, and this is your land. Think about it. It shall come to pass that they shut their mouths. Anyway, and for in that day my father shall work a work which shall be a great and marvelous work among them. And there shall be among them those who will not believe it, although a man shall declare it unto them. They're talking about the last days. A man shall declare this. That's always, we know as members of the church, the marvelous work and wonder is the Book of Mormon. And a man shall declare it. Behold, the life of my servant who's declaring the Book of Mormon shall be in my hand, therefore they shall not hurt him, although he shall be marred because of them, yet I will heal him. For I was shown to them that my wisdom is greater than the cunning of the devil. This is a prophecy in 1830, but he was marred horribly and healed. Like, he died according to his mother. He died and came back. Um, but that was 2 years later, in 1832, after the Book of Mormon was published. And you can look at 1830s versions of the Book of Mormon, and I kind of criticize. I'm like, why do you have an intro? There's an intro that's like anti-Mormon on here. You can, how do you find it? I'm not sure where to look. Book of Mormon editions. Okay. And you can tell it wasn't a Book of Mormon that a member owned. I could just, they're just trying to be more Book of Mormon 1830. So you can see an 1830s version of the Book of Mormon. So it's got all these weird things glued into it. Plagiarism, it's just all this strange. I don't know. I'm like, why? What is this? So it's got all this negative stuff, but this is just how it originally was by the last person that owned it, or it was a copy owned in a library. I don't know. I don't know really why. But it's an 1830s version of the Book of Mormon. So that's more newspaper clippings in it. Okay, so that's a specific, and you can tell this looks like an old ink pen too, from 1830. And so the next version was 1838, and Joseph mentions and even wrote in the newspaper, okay, well, we edited specifically this. So someone like, what are the biggest changes? And someone was online, well, it was this. And then I found, oh, well, they didn't hide it. They were like, oh, this specific thing we were talking about was it was a difference between, was it a difference between, it was either they were preaching, I think it was Ammon preaching, talking about who was the king. Was it King Mosiah or King Benjamin? And one of them died. I think it was Mosiah and then Benjamin, the other way around. I can't even remember. I've read the Book of Mormon a million times. So it was something minor like that. Anyway, 1938. So there's been, I mean, there's been a lot of changes, but nothing that really changes the message. So you can compare and read the 1830s version of the Book of Mormon. So we can keep that there. But I'll go ahead and end the video, but I definitely believe that the tar and feathering was prophesied in 1830 in the Book of Mormon. Um, and he really was very marred, very, very injured. Up until, you can see it on his nose, you can see it on his eyes, on his eyebrows, you can see it on his mouth. Maybe I can see it on his chin, but you can see it on his hair, on his hairline, which ironically curves out right there, and you don't see it on these other versions of the painting. But thankfully Curtis got probably one of the best photos. They gave me a very pixelated one and we didn't use it, but you you can see this shape. It's very uniform and flat. It's a very odd to have this be lighter and then that to be so much darker. It's not very realistic for for highlights. I mean, those are realistic. I can buy those, but I, I'm I'm going with I'm thinking I'm seeing paint coming through that he initially painted his receded hairline, and in this area it maybe just wasn't dry enough, so he just sort of did his best to make it look like it was highlights in his hair. Or he could have been graying. I don't know, but I think the shape, it looks like the shape of Joseph's forehead, and I think that's really exciting and neat to see. Like here, like that, and this when I superimpose Joseph's face on the painting, this shape of the forehead matches really well, and the high cheekbones match really, really well. And you can see that in a video. And so I changed the website, so I think that video is on the top now. So I change the website a lot. If I do a new video and I get excited, you can watch that. So I'll go ahead and end it on there. But I really believe. So you can just see that shape. This is almost exact same angle. It was a little bit sharper of an angle, but you can see very, very high cheekbones, very high cheekbones. So they do categorize, but they can see those features. Some people can call a chin curved, but it's flat, and not understand because they just can't see the shadows. They just aren't good at identifying. There's a little bit of a cleft on that chin. I thought it was on the top. I'm sorry, guys. So now I'm just scrolling through my whole website, but you can see that the lighting is very even. I mean, there's a little bit of side lighting, but it's very, very, especially with these older people. And that's what I was taught. People that are older, you want very even lighting. See, she's elderly. She's probably got a ton of wrinkles, but he's a good photographer. He had a good studio. He had a good, I don't think I want to get copyright here. But I'm going to stop scrolling through my whole website, but yeah, I've done this a few times, and we can skip here to 11 minutes and see how well, or 9 minutes. A lot of things really, really line up very well. Again, the nose, the shape of the nose, the eyebrows. You see that shape of the forehead as I've sketched it, and it comes out like that. But now I can see there's a highlight going out in that exact shape. But I didn't see that because you can't see it very well here, but you can see it a lot better. And you can see the cheekbones fall and the chin is in the right shape. And even the volume of hair is correct. Like where he had hair, it had volume, but it's not curly. It's always brushed forward. So anyway, have a good day.